Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you. Hey, Ashley King down there in Memphis. Everybody, like and share, like and share, like and subscribe. I need you to go to AM 950 Radio. Tell everybody about one of the few independent stations in the United States of America. And go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. And please like and subscribe. And then like and share. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, everybody. It's the 61st anniversary of the March on Washington. Wow. Which is the same date that Emmett Till was murdered. Early that morning, as they started the march, they found out that W.E.B. Du Bois had just died. Coming out of that march just a few weeks later, 2 weeks later, these white racists killed these four little girls and seriously injured a fifth. The struggle does continue, and many people might even be surprised to know that 500 years later, after we've been here since about 1532, we came here with the Spanish, everybody, in about 1532. Even though we really look at the English part of this experiment in 1619, we've been here a long time. It would take us 500 years from now to achieve economic equality. It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe that people were foundational to the building of this nation, the creation of the most profitable empire in human history, that we would still be behind the eight ball. That in 2085, it is projected that the black family will have negative wealth. In 2085, that's just 64 years from now. How can that be? Everybody like and share, like and share, like and subscribe, like and subscribe. Let's talk about it. And I tell you, I was struck by this headline last year. I talked with Chuck Collins about this from the Institute for Policy Studies. But let's dig down with this brilliant economist, Dr. Algernon Austin, because we need to know why it is that they decided to commit to this study. Still a dream, over 500 years to black economic equity. Still a dream. And we have to think about what Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said that day. He talked about that dream, but he also talked about a bad check that America had given to black people. He said, I refuse to believe that the vault of opportunity are empty in the United States of America today. He actually took it to America on that day at the Lincoln Memorial. Yes, he was pulling people together, and they pushed him to the end of the event because they thought that maybe if you had Dr. King at the end, very few people would be there. But oh no, everybody, all 250,000 people of them were waiting to hear what he had to say. He had Mahalia Jackson with him, the icon. She was an icon at that time. Well, he brought her along, and she exhorted him to tell him about the dream, Martin. Come off the text. I hear you. Because she had heard him with C.L. Franklin in Detroit in June. Because C.L. Franklin knew the struggle that Dr. King was having within black leadership because he kept pushing. Thanks to James Bevel and other people, the Bevel rebels inside of his coalition, they were pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. But all of these men were pushing. This march was more than 20 years in the making. A. Philip Randolph and Baird Rustin. There's so much of the history that I would love for Dr. Algernon Austin, who's taken time out of his busy schedule, because so many people are prevailing upon him today, to explain this study. 500 years to achieve economic equity for black people in America. 500 years from now, it is hard to fathom, Dr. Austin.
Yeah.
500 years. What? Explain that. Why did you commit to this study, and were you shocked by those findings?
Well, let me first clarify. The lead author on that important study was Diedrich Asante Muhammad. And I've worked with Diedrich over the years, but I did not work with him on that particular report. Mm-hmm. There is a new report that I did work with Diedrich on, and I'm happy to talk about that. But this is the anniversary of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, so we definitely should pay attention to this. And last year, let me mention that last year, I started a coalition that was called the Full Employment for All Coalition, because one of the demands of the March on Washington was for jobs for all people at good wages. And unfortunately, that hasn't happened. We still have significant unemployment disparities. So yes, it's something that I make a note of every year. And last year, I did that coalition. And Diedrich Asante Muhammad, the lead author, was part of that coalition, and we were pushing. So yes, when you look at the economic demands in particular from the March on Washington, it's very sad that most of them were not realized. We're still struggling for decent wages. We're still struggling for jobs. And what Diedrich would emphasize, we're still struggling for building wealth. Mm-hmm. And as you were referencing, we're not making enough progress in terms of closing the wealth gap. And I think, additionally, we're seeing an even greater wealth polarization in American society. We are churning out billionaires, in the hundreds. But of course, there are millions who are still struggling to get by. And you have to ask yourself what kind of a society it is that produces hundreds of billionaires, people with more money than they can possibly spend in their lifetime, while we have increasing numbers of people who don't have a home to sleep in at night. So it's really an important issue, and unfortunately, we need to figure out a way to get our elected officials to create the policies and the structures that can address the demands that are over 60 years old, that would address some of these problems that we're facing.
But it seems these problems have been around since before the Republic was founded. When you look at the Boston Tea Party, it was a multiracial coalition, and of course the oligarchs had to break that up, right? Because yes. They said, wait a minute, we're being cheated with our wages, or maybe I'm misreading this. You're the academic. I just read my history books and took some classes in school, right? And so I am trying to, because it seems that the point that Dr. David Gibbs from the University of Arizona made in the last hour in his new book is The Revolt of the Rich. He said, really it's, I guess my brother Congressman Jonathan Jackson would put it this way, bipartisan betrayal. Because you've seen Democrats and Republicans participate in this. Whatever their cultural allegiances and alliances have been down through the years, things have just not gotten better for Black people. Now, generally speaking, now white people are beginning to, white folks have Black problems, if you will.
That's a good way of putting it.
I think that's where, that's why, I'm really careful about going after former President Trump, because he represents something. He speaks to grievance. And if we don't understand that, I think we're going to miss the point, because he has come in the wake of Occupy and in the wake of the Tea Party, which were really, they're on the same pole. They were just on the opposite sides of the pole, but it's the same baton, if you will. And the inequality, the staggering inequality that Dr. King saw, that he began to rail against more and more and more, I need you to make the connection for us, because many people miss that about Dr. King. Many people, maybe because my parents were on his staff, and they came into the Bevel rebels. Because my parents were the kids. My mother was 19, my father was 22. They were kids. And Reverend Bevel had a certain appeal to them. He was the one who put the kids in the streets. He said, no. Since the kids are inclined to fight and they want to go to jail, we're going to help them go to jail. Because we've got to push the needle on this. They just killed a child, not even 10 years ago, Emmett Till. Then coming out of that march, they came over and they blew up Sunday school. What is the pushback on evening the economic playing field? Can you explain that?
Well, I think you reference it with the talk about the Tea Party. I mean, we need a multiracial sort of working class movement. Unfortunately, our political system um, relies on money, and therefore people with a lot of money can influence it. Not our political and economic system. So it is a serious struggle, and as I mentioned, it's important to recognize that if we want to go back to slavery, the system of slavery was an economic system.
No, explain
Right.
that, because many of us just look at this.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if one way I think about it is like if white people hated black people and were just like revolted, you know, if you hate people, you don't spend lots of money to send ships to Africa to get these black people that you supposedly hate, to bring them into your country, to have them live right next to you, take care of your kids, prepare your food. You have to recognize it's about economic exploitation of labor.
Have kids with them.
Have kids with them.
Maybe that's not a popular thing to say, but that's why my grandmama wouldn't watch Roots.
Yeah.
No, but I think all of that's important to say.
Yes, it is important because people get confused. I think people get confused. Yes, you have to recognize that fundamentally this is about economic exploitation and extraction. And some people have said, racism is a tool that you can say the wealthy or oligarchs use to divide working people, and therefore they can more effectively exploit working people. So yes, as you're alluding, if and this is what Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was working on. He's working on a poor people's movement. And it was explicitly a multiracial poor people's movement, because when you look at poverty, you will find people of all races. When you look at joblessness, you will find people of all races. When you look at people who are homeless, people who are struggling. Now, it is also true that in all those groups, you will find a greater proportion, disproportion of people of color in all those disadvantaged categories. But it's not a pure black and white situation, that there are many, you can go to the biggest concentration, you go to Appalachia, and you'd find many whites who are struggling.
And they can't get out of that of poverty.
Yeah. And that they were when you look at it, they were exploited the way some of developing countries were exploited. They had a natural resource, coal. And people were like, coal and timber. And wealthy capitalists says, we're going to use those regions to extract coal and timber, and then do the manufacturing and the development elsewhere. And what you have is those communities became impoverished, and wealth was created for people elsewhere. And you see that in developing countries. You see, like, whether it's a agricultural plantation in Latin America or the Caribbean, it's like, yes, we're gonna set up this sugarcane plantation or banana plantation or pineapple plantation, and we're gonna collect all those resources, or it could be mineral resources in some part of Africa. And we extract those resources, we sell it, we manufacture, we make a lot of money, but the places that provide the raw food and the raw minerals, you often find that those places are not wealthy. You know, once you go 3 steps up the chain, it might be very expensive. But you know, if we spend if we spend a few dollars on some bananas, the people who farmed and packed those bananas are not making a few dollars. You know, they're making pennies off of that. And a similar thing happened in Appalachia, which is why you see such a concentrated poverty there, because the wealth was just extracted from those communities.
But it's interesting that that's your through line, that you're taking us, which is what Dr. King did do, and quite frankly, James Farmer. I mean, as our movement continued to mature, Bayard Rustin, and these people were already there, and John Lewis and James Farmer Snick and Kwame Ture, then known as Stokely Carmichael, Fannie Lou Hamer. They saw a through line. They said, wait a minute, if you look at what's happening in the Mississippi Delta, you can connect it to Appalachia. We're all being exploited here. And it seems that, because that was Dr. King's last great campaign, the Poor People's Campaign, and he was getting a lot of traction. He was going to do something, he and so many others, because it was a coalition of leaders. They were going to do something, I guess, that we hadn't seen since the 20s and 30s.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you had more, you would know this, being an economist, being such a brilliant economist, and really being an historian as well. I know you academicians are like, oh no, that's not what my degree is in, but I have to put you there. Because you always connect it to really the zeitgeist,
Mm-hmm.
contextualize it.
Yeah.
You know, and what we're looking at is really in those times, you had more political space. You had socialists, you had communists, you had everybody then. They
Mm-hmm.
did go and sit in on Washington. They
Mm-hmm.
erected a tent city, correct?
Yep.
And that's what Dr. King was planning to do. He said, we're gonna ride poverty out. We're gonna stay right here, so that the legislators on both sides, and the Supreme Court,
Mm-hmm.
and the White House, everybody's gonna have to see us. And if they see us, they're gonna have to do something about it. I think that would work today, don't you? I mean, because it seems that people get rattled when they see a Tea Party, when they see an Occupy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a the solution. I think the solution of a broad. I mean, unfortunately, it's not simple, right? There are multiple problems that we're struggling against, but the solution. But as I mentioned, when you look at the statistics for sort of income and wealth inequality, they haven't been this high since the 1920s. Before everything blew up, before we had the Great Depression, they haven't been this bad.
What happened? I mean, how did we get back here?
Exactly. But which is why it's such a pressing, the sort of growing wealth inequality is such a pressing problem.
Okay.
I was just talking to someone about the housing. It used to be for many decades, people who are lower income, were saying the rent is too damn high.
Yes,
and now
candidate did say that, and guess what? He got the biggest applause lines in New York City.
Exactly. But now there are people in the middle class saying the same thing.
Wait a minute, people who make 6 figures.
Yeah.
If I have one more Uber driver in a Mercedes or a Lexus, or I mean, and I'm wait a minute, mind you, I'm not diminishing anyone
Hmm.
because you get these jobs, you have them for a few years, and you feel like you, okay, I've stabilized, so I can get me a home. Because number
Hmm.
one, it's your taxes are killing you, so
Hmm.
you gotta buy something because if you don't buy something, your money's just going out the window, right?
Hmm.
So these people did that. They're like, okay, well, I want a car. Well, I want a nice car. What's wrong with that, Dr. Austin?
No, no. I,
And
I,
but this is something has happened.
yeah, but
It's like this house of cards is collapsing beneath us.
yeah, yeah. So there is this strain, and you're seeing it particularly in terms of housing costs. But the challenge, we also are in this period. So we've got this like growing and massive income inequality, but you also have people um, trying to deflect away from the problem of growth in billionaires, income inequality, wealth inequality, and say, okay, who can we blame this on? How can we divide people to prevent them from focusing on income inequality? And the flavor of the year or the recent years is immigrants, right? It's like it's all, of course,
It's their
other
fault.
people, so, and that's really a distraction from, what's fundamentally causing this massive income inequality. We have policies, we have tax policies, for example. You have people making billions and paying zero in taxes. And you have corporations making hundreds of billions and paying zero in taxes. And it's like, how is this possible when Warren Buffett famously observed that he's one of the richest men in the country, and of course one of the richest in the world. And he observed, hey, my administrative assistant is paying more in taxes, has a higher tax rate than I do.
You know, but the thing is, the president will take his call. They could do something about this. I mean, now there are people on track to become trillionaires. And let us not be fooled, everybody. The wealthiest family on earth, it's a British royal family. At
Mm.
one point, the Queen, now her son, owned up to one-sixth of the land mass on earth. They controlled oceans. That's not just the crown. No, 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 no. It's that family, Dr. Austin.
Wow.
And of course, this book, Who Owns the World, by, of course, no less than an Irish Republican, who said, I mean, because they're having to pay reparations to the crown for their freedom, like the Haitians are having to pay France
Wow.
to make me free. I mean, when you get to Northern Ireland, they are to the left of Angela Davis because and they are so clear on colonialism on this business project, which is what you were going to at the top of your explanation of this study and of the work that you're doing, because we can go past this because the fact is the economic playing field, as Reverend Jesse Jackson has been saying forever, it's not even. It's not even. It's not
Right,
even close.
right, right.
And it's not. It's never. I would kind of go back and forth with my father about it. My whole family would. Like I'm not excited about another black millionaire. Not unless.
Thank you
Not.
very much. Thank you
I'm
very
not.
much. Because
I'm.
sometimes I think people get um,
Sometimes, come on now.
distracted.
I'm not. Because I've seen some white businessmen. I saw one gentleman who was featured on 60 Minutes, who was leaving his company to the workers.
Mm,
I said, no, no, no. I can get with him. That's a hero. When
hmm.
I look at the presidential debate, even with Hillary Clinton and then Senator Obama on the debate stage, the only candidate who would say yes, blacks deserve reparations, and while you're at it, look at Appalachia, because that's
Hmm.
where he's from. He said, "Oh no, 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 no. we're not going to get this right until you make things right with black people. And he was unequivocal in his support of reparations, which is restoration. We've lost 90% of our farmland. We never even got our 40 acres and a mule. And we've had all of our advances have been stolen from us. We were bombed out of Tulsa,
Mm-hmm.
redlined out of decent housing. How, help me to begin to make this right. Everyone is
Yeah.
commenting on my pink. I've got to go out with my brother this afternoon. Yes, I'm making a digression. Even though I have been way under the weather, my brother Jonathan needs me, and so I'm going to go with him, and then I'm going to come back and crawl into bed. But that's why I'm wearing all this pink because I have to go somewhere and I have to be with him. And yes, we're on in the afternoons because I've had walking pneumonia this week. That's what I've got. And so getting up at 3 in the morning, which I still do, but doing the show at 6 was just not going to work this week. Maybe after the holiday, everybody. But thank you for sticking with me. I just love you all to pieces. But we've got a treat with us today, and Dr. LaShawn Latrice, who's a community psychologist, she's in the backstage area because I know she has some questions for you too. But we have been blessed to have this brilliant economist. My father has so much respect for you and the work that you've been doing down through the years. And we've been talking about this racial wealth gap. No one even mentions indigenous people. They have far worse outcomes in terms of health, economics, and everything than black people. They're all the way at the bottom. And no one is talking about that. But of course, he is from the Center for Economic and Policy Research, and they do such brilliant work. And indeed, it's your mission to help. I mean, you help us to see just where we are as a nation. I'm not just going to make it just say that you help us to look at inequality. Yeah, but you help us to see where we are because
Yeah.
if black people are here, you know, what do they say? A chain is only as strong as its weakest link.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And and now I know you laughed at the top, but I said white folks have black problems because that's where you hear the screaming and because we're accustomed to, yeah, you all got us one more time. You've been unfair. You know this thing was unfair because you brought us over here. Black people did not work for free. We were not paid.
Mm-hmm.
So we get it. Now some people are really beginning to understand that. And I'm trying to find out what is the way out, Dr. Austin.
Yeah, well, there are a couple of facts. One that I wanted to bring up, and another thing that you just spurred in my mind. So, at the time of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, the average the CEO at the top firms, the top like 350 firms or so, made about 20 times what the average worker made. 20 times, that's a decent amount. You're making 20 times what the average worker is making. Today, it's over 300 times. Over. Now, did CEOs all of a sudden become so much smarter, so much more productive, so much better at everything? Of course not. We've changed our tax policy. We've broken unions. We've had we've outsourced. We've exported. So we've structured our economy so that CEOs are making way more than they did in the past, and unfortunately, the average workers, of course, have not been able to keep up with that. As I have mentioned before, the amount of income inequality and wealth inequality that we see today is completely off the charts, but not enough people pay attention to that. You were talking about white people having black people problems, and you reminded me of this work by these two economists, and they called it deaths of despair.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So in places like Appalachia and other places in the Midwest, those places with deindustrialization and also with illicit drugs, with the opioid
Wait,
epidemic and stuff.
wait a minute, that the sack was dumped. Just
Exactly.
as crack was dumped in the
Exactly.
black community, they dumped opioids into these white communities.
Exactly.
There.
Exactly. Which is why it's important to recognize this,
Yeah.
this class inequality, this class system. But yes, the all of a sudden these white communities had started having problems that were more typical of Black communities, and we saw this massive increase in deaths. I mean, people, you have a community psychologist coming on. Maybe that person can speak about it. I think people psychologically just couldn't handle it. It's like, I'm white. I'm supposed to be not have these kinds of problems.
Wait a minute, because these lazy people, these lazy bums. I mean, and you know what? I'm not clowning white people because, to be fair to them, they were sold a bill of goods.
Yes.
They were lied to, and now many of them are beginning to see that they were lied to, and they're getting angry. That's why when you go to a Trump rally, you all see. Well, you got to be careful talking about these candidates, and about people's leaders, because it's like talking. I'm a black person. I'm from the black church. You don't talk about pastor. I didn't say the pastor. I said pastor. Because when you talk about someone's pastor, you're talking about the whole congregation.
Mm-hmm.
When you start, that's a mistake that, oh, and I love Hillary Clinton, but she made a mistake when she talked about the deplorables. I said, hey, stop her. Oh, because she was, she didn't mean to, I didn't think she meant to be condescending, but a whole group of people were insulted by that.
Mm-hmm.
And it just keeps on going. If you go to these rallies, you're going to see some black people there.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see some white people there. You're going to see some Latinos there. You're going to see some everybody there. And you're going to see some mixed couples there. You're going to see some everybody there because everybody, you're going to see some people far right and some people who were left.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody feels that they've been left behind.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not making excuses for anyone, Dr. Austin. I'm just saying 61 years after the March on Washington, all of the things that Dr. King was prophetically, that he tried to warn us about. Where do we go from here? Chaos of community.
Mm-hmm.
Why we can't wait. Y'all, you can't, this racism and this militarism and this materialism, we are going to die a spiritual death. We're investing in war. We're not investing in people. And look at where we are.
Yes. Yes.
I know you're an economist. I know you all don't like to talk like this, but you know what you're seeing. This is unsustainable. I mean, I'm being followed in the grocery store because people don't have money.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Austin, how does this change? Because I don't see either party making the substantial moves that I think are going to be necessary for us to get out of this.
Yes, it's very difficult, and it's very difficult for people to get clear information. I mean, there are a number of forces unfortunately working against us. One, there are people who are benefiting from the way things are, people who are getting wealthier, who don't want policies to change, who don't want, they like the fact that CEOs are making over 300 times what the average worker is, and they don't want to go back to the day when CEOs only made 100 times what the average worker did. They're like, how could I only have 100 times what I could have over 300 times?
But do you know how crazy that's? I mean, Dr. Austin,
it is crazy. It is crazy.
And it's unsustainable. How do you have people working in your house who are being paid uh, just past poverty wages, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel safe? I mean, that to me is the ultimate hubris, to feel safe with someone while you're sitting up here chomping down on
Yeah.
your organic food.
Yeah, and we're seeing it, with the unaffordability of housing. We have these cities, these wealthy enclaves, and the people who do the cleaning and the cooking and the teaching of the children have to live, an hour or 2 hours away because they can't afford to live in the city that they work in. So that becomes a serious problem. There was just an article that I was reading about today about flight attendants who are homeless.
Yes.
It's just like that doesn't make any sense. And of course, if you look at the profits of the airline industry, they're pretty healthy looking to me. Why are the flight attendants homeless? So yes, I do think that this is not sustainable. At some point, it's just going to break. Well, it's already breaking. It's
What
already
do you mean?
breaking.
What do you mean it's already breaking?
Well, that people are just the fact that you have this increase in homelessness. That's a
Yeah.
break, right? That
Yeah.
is that is the system not working. I mean, it's not a sort of a critical break where the everything shuts down, but it's clearly not the way um, anyone, I think, with decency and humanity would think this is good,
Well, it's
right?
breaking apart now.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think you're right. I think it's like people keep looking for January 6th to happen again. It doesn't happen the same way, but it does happen, and then it happens even more profoundly. What did John F. Kennedy say? Riots are the language of the unheard,
Yeah,
and people
yeah, and
feel unheard. Yes.
that's a real problem because we don't want to go there. We've seen. Luckily, we haven't had sort of mass scale riots, but recently in the United Kingdom, there have been some anti-immigrant riots. I mean, we've had smaller things, but it certainly can get a lot worse than what we've seen. So you have, I mean, it really requires the type of work that King did and frankly your father did, sort of organizing and bringing a rainbow coalition together is really necessary. So we need those organizers, and it's very hard because the other challenge. So one, there's economic stress, which unfortunately doesn't necessarily bring out the best in people.
Yeah.
But then you have people, as I mentioned, wealthy people who are working to foster division. Um, and as one of the additional tools is we have a lot of disinformation and misinformation that people have to wade through to find out what's really going on, and that's unfortunate. And with the rise of these AI tools, it becomes so much easier to spread misinformation and to sow division. Unfortunately, our social media algorithms like conflict because conflict leads to more views. So they tend to have algorithms that can be feed conflict and division, and then you can have bots and AI that spread misinformation. So it's sad. There are a lot of challenges, but I think on the good, on the positive, I think if you can get people, to talk to people, you know, you know, at the even people on, whatever you define as the other side, that human connection and that human recognition. is there. But the challenge is our social media and other forces are really working hard to prevent people from having real engagement with each other.
Well, and the resistance to engagement with each other. I'm going to bring up Dr. LaShawn Latrice, the community psychologist, because I know she has been eager to say something to you. But, I think because now I think one of the challenges in this, because this happened, quite frankly, before COVID. Everybody was here in their phones. We're not engaging each other. And we're further and further apart, even as we sit close together in public transportation or in restaurants. We couldn't be. People will text each other before they'll say hello,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not going to resolve these issues this way. Dr. Latrice, is there anything you'd like to say? Because I know we're in this presidential election season, and she has expressed concerns, Dr. Austin, about the questions that are not being asked, let alone answered. Um, and while you support these candidates, or even if you don't, um, you want people to answer the questions. That's why I'm really glad that Vice President Harris is going to have this sit down with Dana Bash.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't care what anybody else, I need you to talk to us.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Absolutely.
people are in, we deserve that. And what we need from you now, we need to know what you're going to do. Because these are tough times, and they're calling for tough people. And I think that she's ready for this. That having been said, I think we're going to have to continue to push her so we can help her. But you know what? Even if, I don't even want to say that, but no matter who wins, you got to advocate for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And I think that, let me just put it that way, so I can stay well. Just whew. Okay. So, Dr. LaShawn Latrice, You're talking with Dr. Algernon Austin, and so what are your thoughts?
I think it's very significant, the things that are being pointed out, because many people can see things being shaped a certain way, and they never really associate it to real things. People kind of like, oh, that's a conspiracy. That's a conspiracy. But I'm listening to the conversation, and much of what people talk about on a day to day basis is intentional. Like putting drugs in a certain community, or making one thing an epidemic and another thing a crime. So you reverted back to those conversations talking about opioids versus the crack, and it makes me think that no matter where we go and what we're doing, there is always someone forming the narrative for us. The instance in how disconnected we are from everyday communication, and everybody's got their face in their phones, and then the technology is running everything. We have to really, really pay attention. How are they able to get people to perform like that? Because all of that is intentional, and it's happening just how it was planned to happen. But people generally don't ask those questions about things like that shape us, because now the babies are getting phones, younger people are getting, and it's certain things that are drawing them to those things. So I learned from another medical professional that um, there is a certain way the screen portrays the blue light that
Oh, you
causes,
went down.
sorry
Okay.
about
Yeah.
that. There's a certain way the blue light on our cell phones kind of draw us in, and it does something to our brain waves. And at a certain time of day, that's known by a lot of people. And when I first heard that, I thought about it, and I said, well, what is that thing that makes people attracted to their cell phones more than, like, you could literally be sitting next to someone and you'll text them instead of just turn your head and talk to them, you know? And so a lot of things like that are constructed, but it's an overall um, perspective and narrative that's being intentionally shaped. So I am very interested in what Dr. Austin is saying and sharing, and it's just kind of confirming many of the suspicions of things that we talk about on a day to day basis.
because what did they say? Dr. King told us that good people have to act because evil people are planning. I mean,
Mm.
that is very real. Don't think that we're here by happenstance.
That's
Some
right.
people. My mother was at a dinner. Dr. Austin. It was almost 50 years ago. It was in the late 70s, and she was very offended. I think even she might have it might have even been it was the owners of some of America's major newspapers. Let's put it that way. And it
Hmm.
was a private dinner. And they one of them said, Mrs. Jackson, I don't know what black people are going to do because if they are not in the service economy, they're not going to make it. And my mother was like, what? And she came home furious. Now, none of us were in college yet. Please, we were not even in high school. But she was like, yeah, you're going to study this, and this because these people have this plan for you. And you know what? Here we are, Dr. Austin. And we keep allowing, because the CIA came up with the expression conspiracy theory. That was in the wake of the Kennedy assassination to get you away from asking questions about what happened to John F. Kennedy in the middle of the street. Some people plot, other people. Therefore, you must plan, and we've got to create a plan to get out of this economic hole because we're here and we could be here. We don't have 5 more centuries to get
Hmm.
out of this. I mean, Dr. Austin, somebody's hungry right now and they don't even know where their next meal is coming from.
Yeah.
And these are grown people and these are kids. Somebody is living in a car if they have one. Too many people live on the viaduct. Somebody, if there's enough space in the shelter, that's where they're going to live tonight. And think about our children. How do you go to school with that? How do you how do you
Hmm.
how
Yeah.
do you you can't see the chalkboard. Your stomach
Hmm.
is growling and
Hmm.
I don't know what to say.
Yeah. Or you have to change schools repeatedly because you don't have a permanent
That's
residence,
right.
right?
That's right.
And that's extremely disruptive to your schooling and your ability to, complete school and then to get a job. And, how do you can get unfortunately trapped in because of that early disadvantage. So yeah, so we have power as individuals. One, we can form organizations, we can organize, we can contact our elected officials, local, state, federal. We can run for office ourselves. So I encourage, I always encourage people, you know, there's usually something you can do. If you have the means and you can care about these issues, you can donate to an organization that's working on these. But I think it's really important that people, you know, try to reach out, contact their representatives about the issues that we're talking about today,
Mhm.
500 years, and say, look, something is wrong that we have more and more billionaires while we still have so many people struggling to find a home, to pay the rent, to pay their medical bills, to pay for their education. There's a We all know there's a better way. It doesn't have to be this way.
Mhm.
And you, elected official, what are you going to do about it? you know
Oh my gosh, what are you? But I have to tell you, we wouldn't be able to have these conversations. Let me just say this: we are indebted to you forever and ever and ever. Without the work that you and the Institute for Policy Studies, and,
Yes, the Diedrich Asante Mohammed. He was at the Institute for Policy Studies and the National Community Reinvestment Coalition, but now he has a new job. He's president of the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies,
that's
the,
right.
the nation's black think tank. He's now the president of the nation's black
That's
think
right.
tank. So
And
we
I'm going
can
to have
we can
one.
all congratulate him on his new position.
I mean, 'cause please. I mean, because we need that, because we need we need you and your research, your intentional research, because some of us are research past. I mean, people don't want to focus on this damage, this profound damage that's been done to Black people. But the thing is, if you make things right with the indigenous people first, because this is their land, we are occupying their land, and they index far worse than Black people. If you can imagine that, you go to a reservation and you will see exactly what I mean. Um, and then you look at Black people. If you go to Appalachia, that's why J.D. Vance is seen by so many as someone who's been traitorous to that group of people, because he's not really telling their story. He's acting out his pain, his shame with his mother, and you know what? And that's something, God bless him, that he's got to work through. I mean, hell, heaven help him. But the fact is, a lot of people, we had crack planted in the Black community, and guess what? Opioids were planted in the white community. And you devastated generations of white, Black, brown, yellow, and red people. And it's a horrible thing. So the last couple of minutes, they belong to you, Dr. Algernon Austin. What do you want us to do? What can we be on the lookout for? Because I'm going to reach back out to you so I can have you back on this next week. Because, because it's the election 2024 season. And I think that you can help us to formulate the questions that we need to be asking of the presidential tickets, of all of our elected officials, and particularly those on the state level, since they control so much of the money, right?
Yeah,
The
exactly.
last 2 minutes.
Dietrich, again, who's now president of the Center for Political and Economic Studies, and I just did a new report that came out just Monday, just a couple days ago, on the current state of Black America. And the title is, you can find it on my organization's website, the Center for Economic and Policy Research. And the website is CEPR, for the Center for Economic and Policy Research, .net. So it's CEPR.net. And you can find the report. It's called The Best Black Economy in Generations and Why It Isn't Enough. So it essentially is like, although things are better, we last year we had a historically low Black unemployment rate. Of course, it was still much higher than the white rate. Of course, we still needed, by my calculations, 1.4 million more jobs for Black people to have the same employment rate as white people. And that missing those 1.4 million jobs meant that Black America lost out on $60 billion of income that we did not have. And as we were talking about, there is still a massive wealth disparity. Like at the median, it's over $100,000. So the Black wealth level is over $100,000 lower than the median white wealth level. So it's both true that things are better, and there's still a massive gap to close. There's still a lot of work. So you can find that report at CPR.net. Dietrich and I wrote it, and we'll give you the sort of up-to-date economic information on the state of Black America.
Well, I'm going to let you have the holiday off, and you will hear from me. Okay, not Monday night, but Tuesday.
Okay, great. We're happy. We're happy to speak with you. This is a great opportunity. Thank you very much.
Oh, look, and I'm going to get you on Reverend's nationally syndicated show, Keep Hope Alive, so we can talk about it there as well, because we need to be restored. I think that if America resolves this problem, if we have the will to do it, you'll make things right with indigenous people. You'll make things right with all women. Black women have to work 19 months to make what a white man of similar qualifications makes in 12 months. Indigenous women have to work 23 and a half months. Latino women have to work 23 months. My dear people, that is unsustainable. We can't do that. And I know you people know that this inequality is not right, Black women lose almost $900,000, just the average working Black woman, that could count toward retirement.
Mm-hmm.
That's why when you go to a fast food restaurant, we're sitting there working. Dr. LaShawn Latrice. I mean, every time I would go get something to eat, some coffee or something in the morning, because that's kind of where I end with those restaurants. Bless their hearts, but I'm able to. That's the other piece. And when I would see an elder come to the window, my heart would break, and I would just thank God that my grandmothers were at home. Because they had, even though they had worked all their lives and they worked very hard, but their children had done so well
Mm-hmm.
that they didn't have, when they retired, they didn't skip a beat. In fact, they lived better than they had when they were working.
That's
That's
great.
that's a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And all of our elders deserve that. And you know what? As Dr. King and Roy Wilkins and James Farmer and Bayard Rustin and all of these great men and women and John Lewis and Dorothy Cotton and Mahalia Jackson and Rabbi Heschel and the nuns and all of these people who were at the March on Washington, they were fighting for us to have a just society and a more peaceful world. They were fighting for jobs and justice. Thank you, Charlton Heston. Thank you, Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte and Sammy Davis and Nancy Wilson and Diane Carroll and everybody. Thank you all. Thank you, Marlon Brando. Thank you for 60 plus years ago saying, you know what, we're going to come together and we're going to do something, even if, thank you, Joan Baez. Thank you, Bob Dylan. Thank you. Thank you to Peter, Paul, and Mary. Thank you. We got to thank you. There's so many people whose names I have not called, but we just thank God for you. We thank you. We thank you. And we're going to continue with the work. We're going to continue with the work. And I thank you, Dr. Algernon Austin, for the work that you have done, for keeping us, for doing the unpopular work, and for lifting us up and letting the world know that no, it is not in our imagination. Well, that you know what, Dr. LaShawn Latrice, we're not crazy. There's structural inequality that must be dismantled, and we must rebuild a more perfect union. And together we can do it. And if we rebuild a more perfect union, everybody, from the bluest of black to the whitest of white and everybody in between, we will all come up together. I believe that. America, no more bouncing checks. The vault of opportunity, it's not empty. And if it's been emptied by these greedy people, they need to put the money back.
Amen. Amen.
How about that piece? Love you. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Santita Jackson Show. God bless you, everybody. Dr.
Okay.
Algernon Austin, Dr. LaShawn Latrice, sending you so much love. God bless you.